Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio. So today, I'm going to be showing you round 4 of this wonderful league challenge that we had in Norwich. And we've got a good one for you right now. We have got Scott Simmons on the left. We saw him in a previous round. He is going to be playing Volcanion, and it looks like he just had a mulligan. And on the right, we have got Simon Humphrey. He is going to be playing Greninja. Now, this is a weird kind of matchup. Quite often you would look at this and go, well, hang on a second, Scott's playing a fire deck and Simon's playing a water deck. This means that it should be going in Simon's favour. Well, it's not quite that simple, ladies and gentlemen, because Seb's deck hits a lot harder than Simon's deck. But then again, Seb's deck kind of relies upon abilities which Simon's deck shuts off. So, Simon, we got the mulligan. Is he going first? I think he might be going first as well here. He's got a Froakie in the active. He is going first. He's got a dive ball. And maybe he plays Remoraid and he goes for Artillery and goes for a Remoraid here. Or maybe he just goes and plays another Froakie. If he's got very little in his hand, he could just go for a Frogadier for next turn. But we know that Scott's deck is absolutely capable of KOing a 60 HP Pokemon on his first turn. When he's allowed to attack, of course. It's not going to be terribly difficult. I mean, we would expect Scott to get a KO on his turn. That Froakie, I don't like its chances of still being in the active at the beginning of Simon's next turn. Of course, Volcanion, as you can see, 20 damage for 1 energy, but you stick a Fighting Fury bout and it goes up to 30. You use 1 ability from Volcanion EX to do an extra 30 damage, and that is 60 damage and a KO right there. So not a great turn from Simon, but he's got a Froakie on the bench. There is a Fighting Fury bout I said about. He has got a Froakie on the bench with an energy attached, and you know what? That's alright. It means that if he's got a Frogadier in hand, next turn he can just evolve to Frogadier and use that Water Duplicate's attack to set up. Now, it may well be, I can't see much of his hand, but it might be that he's got a supporter, but he's happy just doing his thing. If he's got a Frogadier in hand, this is quite good. And if you don't play a supporter, then your opponent sits there thinking, well, do I want to end him or not? Do I want to give him a new hand? Did he not play a supporter because he doesn't have one? Or did he not play a supporter because he's got everything he needs in hand? Scott, for his part, he gets an Ultra Ball, discarding 2 supporters he doesn't need right now, an Olympia and a Pokemon Ranger, and of course he's going to be able to reuse them with Versus Seeker. Now, he does get 2 Volcanion EX on the bench. Now, if Scott's got 2 energy here, he'll have the KO. He's already doing 30 damage with that Volcanion, 20 base plus 10 for the Fighting Fury belt. So, all he needs to do here is just use 1 Steam Up, and he will be able to do 60 damage and get the KO here. Of course, he would also need an energy on the active, so he needs 2 energy there. Now, there is an Ultra Ball coming down from Scott, possibly for another Shaman here. Although if I did do an analysis of Scott's deck on this very channel, I believe he only plays the 1 Shaman. If I remember correctly, it's only 1 Shaman that's actually being played by Scott here, which means he's going to have to, if he wants to get set up here, he's going to have to do it without using any more Shaman. And yes, a quick check of his deck list does see that he is only playing a single Shaman here. So he'll be wanting to get a Remoraid down. Now, I said I don't know if Simon plays Octillery, but I know that Scott does, and he's going to want to get a Remoraid on the field turn 1. That is something his deck wants to do. Now, he hasn't played a supporter yet, so he can play a Sycamore and try and draw into 2 of those energy. And as we saw, and if you want to see an analysis of Scott's deck, I have put it in the description of this video, just in case you haven't seen it. So we see a Skyfield going down, which is slightly unfortunate. Not the end of the world, but unfortunate. And we see a Versus Seeker being discarded. Not great, but of course there is every possibility Scott's going to play something like a Professor Sycamore now. It is, like in a lot of decks, the most common supporter in Scott's deck. So there's every possibility here. He's just going to play that Professor Sycamore, discard all the cards in his hand, and off he goes. Now, there is the energy And he's got that Remoraid down. Does he have the Sycamore? He doesn't have the Sycamore. So he can only hit for 30. And that is a reprieve there for Simon. There is the Frogadier. Let's hope he has another energy in his hand. He does, which is good. Does he have a supporter to play, though? Or is it just a straight water duplicate? Okay, now... Well... See, again, even here, I got told off when I was playing Greninja at one point for playing a supporter, because you might think if you're Simon here, well, let's just play a supporter. I'll draw some more cards. But of course, and he's got a Frogadier prized. Water duplicates allows you to grab all your Frogadiers and put them on your bench. Well, if he drew into a couple of Frogadiers, he wouldn't then be able to use water duplicates to grab them. Yes, I know there's one Froakie on his bench he could have evolved, but worst case scenario, he could have drawn into all of his Frogadiers, and that would have been very bad. So Scott here is looking, he's going to go a prize up. And we do see there, he's got the Octillery there. He's got that Abyssal Hand ability, drawing until he's got 5 cards. Not many supporters played so far. Now, there is a Steam Up, which he needed. Unfortunately, that Frogadier has 40 HP remaining. Scott is only doing 30 with his active Volcanion at the moment, so he does need to go ahead here and get the hit with that Volcanion. He needs to do the Steam Up. If he doesn't, he won't get the KO. He'll be 10 HP short. Now, here's a slight problem for Scott here. Oh, and there is a Sycamore getting rid of an N as well. So he did get a few, and you see Scott there making a conscious decision. I am not going to give Simon a new hand. I don't think Simon's got anything here. He's had 2 turns. Now there is a possibility that he just didn't want to draw into the Frogadiers, but it's unlikely. Now that looks like a second Steam Up, and you might be thinking, well, why would he do a second Steam Up? Well, as we can see there, Volcanion's attack allows him to attach 2 energy from the discard to his bench Pokemon. So even where you don't need to do the extra damage with those Steam Up abilities, you can still here go ahead and put those energies in the discard to attach. Now, this is going to be the key turn for Simon. He needs a Breakpoint Greninja. Breakpoint Greninja does 40 damage and allows you... Well, it doesn't allow you. It says straight up, your opponent cannot use abilities next turn. There it is. Oh, and there's a Super Rod. Now, does he have... Now, he has got that Frogadier. Oh, and he doesn't have, unfortunately, anything. Is that every card in his hand? I believe he did that very fast. I believe he just Super Rodded a Frogadier and then immediately used Ultra Ball to discard the last 2 cards in his hand to grab it out again and evolve it. There is no energy there, and he did. Now, he has played a Hex Maniac, which might make it very difficult, for Scott to get the KO here. Now, you see Scott building up that Volcanion EX. Now, it looks like a risky play. Volcanion EX is an EX, which is weak to water. Not good. But of course, it's got 180 HP. Now, a Moonlight Slash will do 80 damage at most, which doubles to 160, which isn't enough to KO a Volcanion that's weak to water. Whereas Volcanion EX does 130 for free energy, which is enough to get a KO on a Greninja. Now, once Simon gets the abilities going, now if he's got a Greninja break, he can use the ability and then use Moonlight Slash to get the KO, but he can't do that without the break. He doesn't have the break. So Scott here is basically saying, look, I need to get going fast in this game. I'm going to use my Volcanion EX. I'm going to get the KO on his Greninja. I am going to take the risk, because as it stands at the moment, we haven't seen a Wally from Simon. A lot of decks don't play Wally. So if I can get the KO without him getting a break, and unfortunately here, no break. Well, he does get an energy. So we do see 80 damage, and those abilities are turned off. So, could be worse. Could be better, could be worse. Shadow Stitching there, 40 damage, doubled for the weakness. Now, Scott wanted to get the KO with that Volcanion. We saw that he just couldn't get that Volcanion out the active. Now he can get it out the active, so now he manually retreats. Now he can get the KO with that Volcanion. Now this is a slight pain, of course, because he now leaves that Volcanion in the active. But again, like I said on the previous turn, there's no Greninja on Simon's side of the field. So Simon cannot go Greninja Wally here, so he's alright. Is it a Greninja? It's a dive ball for a Greninja. That's pretty sweet. That's alright. That's kind of funky. I like that. He's got just enough for the time being, but there will be no break, and this is what Scott's relying on. Now, way back on turn 1, we saw Scott discard a Pokemon Ranger. Now, we know he's used one Versus Seeker already, but we also know... Oh, he's got an Octillery, of course, but there's going to be a Shadow Stitching here. Octillery's not going to do anything. If Scott's got a Versus Seeker here, he can turn off Volcanion, the effect of Volcanion's attack, and get the KO on this Greninja here. Does he have it? He has an Energy Retrieval, but of course there will be no Steam Up here. Oh, he's going for it. This is a big play from Scott. He could have used Pokemon Ranger to get around the effect of Volcanion's attack. Instead, he manually retreats and says, you know what, I'm going for it. I can pretty much wipe your board clean with one Volcanic Heat, so I'm going for it. And he does. Very, very nice play from Scott there. Looks like a risky play, but it was by far the best play he could have made. I've run you out of Greninjas. Now, if Greninja gets going, Volcanion basically sits there and cries. But if Volcanion gets enough energy on the field and doesn't need those steam ups, it's all good. Now, this is not quite a done deal for Scott. He will still need to be able to use Pokemon Ranger, because remember, Volcanion's Volcanic Heat says this Pokemon cannot attack during your next turn. You can turn off that using Pokemon Ranger. So we see a Float Stone, meaning he won't have to do the painful discard to retreat, and he has a second Octillery. So, how many cards can he play out of his hand? He just needs that Versus Seeker to get that Pokemon Ranger, and that will guarantee the win. He plays a Fighting Fury Belt on his Shaman. Doesn't need it, just gets a card out of his hand. Now, in the middle of the game, a double Greninja Break ability. Discard a water from your hand, do 60 to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Doing that twice would KO a Shaman. Fighting Fury Bout would be useful. It's not the case at the moment. So we see a Steam Up, we see an Energy Attachment. He's just trying to thin his hand. Does he have the Versus Seeker? He uses a second Steam Up. And there we do see... At that stage, he didn't even need the Versus Seeker anymore, of course, because that non-EX Volcanion was already doing 30 damage with the regular attack and the Fighting Fury Bout. 2 Steam Ups put that 30 up to 90, which is enough to get the KO. So even without the Versus Seeker, Scott gets the KO. Once again, a huge thank you to Scott and to Simon for agreeing to be on stream. I really appreciate that. They are both lovely chaps. And thank you to Scott again, and Matthew and everyone at Athena Games for arranging this recording, for letting me record. I enjoy being able to commentate them. You guys have told me that you enjoy being able to watch the commentaries of them. So as long as I've got nice people sending me games, this stuff is going to keep going and we can all continue to have fun and life can continue to be good. Now, you know the deal, ladies and gentlemen. There is a like button. Use it. There's a subscribe button. Use it. There is a comment section. Tell me what I got wrong. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and you can email me, as always, at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk. But the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.